Welcome everyone to the Chief Marketing Officer panel. My name is Venk Shukla. I'm a long-time TiE volunteer and chair of this track. What we have brought here are thought leaders and the biggest buyers of the MarTech technology in this panel today. So please feel free to ask the questions and benefit from their insight and wisdom. So with this, let me introduce the moderator of this panel, Jean English, CMO of Palo Alto Networks, who has graciously agreed to moderate this panel. Jean, please take it from here.
Great, thank you so much, Megan, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And thank you so much for joining us here on the CMO panel. I have to say, what a year it's been. As we now come into 2021, so much optimism, as we think about what have we been going through? We're right now, we're in COVID. We see, vaccinations coming. We see that, businesses are starting to open up. But, as we look at transformations that have been happening, everyone's always been talking about digital transformation, and they've been losing technologies such as the cloud and AI and ML. They've definitely been looking at how they use, more in terms of analytics. And absolutely, when they think about what that means to shape the way in which they work, and now working from anywhere, operating, innovating, and really being able to drive the business and the bottom line. If you think about that, though, in terms of a marketer, what does that mean for us? And what's our role, and how's that been shifting, over the last couple of years and over this last year and now going forward? And so we wanted to take some time to have some of the best and top CMOs in the world come together, on this panel. And I'm honored to moderate as well as serve on this panel and talk through what are some of the top trends and things that are happening today? What are some of the opportunities? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the ways in which we're using digital technologies, how we're engaging more with customers, how we as marketers are really accelerating and driving the bottom line, and working across the whole customer set as we look at our new customers, our current customers, and how we work across our teams. And so I'd like to introduce our panel. First off, Carol Carpenter. She is currently the CMO of VMWare, and she's been responsible for the marketing and leadership there since June of 2020, leading all of the marketing organization, including brand, demand gen, solutions partner, and field marketing. Carol, you bring over 25 years, which is absolutely amazing, and is a true, professional tech in solving customer problems, loving to build and scale new products. And so really proud of the work you're doing on high performing teams and how you have teams really drive not only work that you see, in VMware today, but across a lot of the different work you've seen in different tech companies as your teams have moved into awesome and amazing jobs. I also would like to introduce Stacy Greiner, who is the CMO for Dun & Bradstreet, leading provider of data and analytics, responsible for driving growth, especially as you look at, how D&B is our partner of choice to protect and grow their businesses. And so career in engineering, developer in Silicon Valley, definitely been focused on product marketing or product management, using the MBA from MIT to think through, your passion for data and analytics and how you bring that to life in marketing, and how you really drive it as a data engine in Dun & Bradstreet as well. So thank you for joining us. We also have Chandar Pattabhiram, and he's really focused on, I love it, a marketer for life. CMO of Coupa, and that's since 2017. So you've been there for a while. Focused on strategic and product marketing, growth marketing, corporate marketing, and previously the CMO of Marketo, which is a tool many of us use, and Badgeville. As we look at, what you've done, years at Anderson Consulting, deep insights, and then being able to think about how you're advising Fortune 500 companies. I understand you're passionate for golf and tennis and love drumming and karaoke. And so that is wonderful. And Dallas Cowboy fan, maybe not so happy, as I understand, for a couple of years, always happy with the family, and in COVID, even more togetherness. So wonderful. Okay, so guys, thank you so much for joining us on this panel. And we are going to get started. Okay, so we thought we'd start out by focusing in on a key question for all of us to answer, which is, what do you consider the biggest opportunity and challenge for the CMOs for what we see going into 2021? And Carol, I'm going to start with you.
Wow, so many challenges and opportunities, as you put it. The biggest for us was, I joined last June, and VMworld is kind of this iconic industry event that's been going on for 20 years. And it obviously is the move to all digital. How do we drive engagement over Zoom? And a fun fact that my team was sharing, attention spans have actually shrunk from 20 seconds to 8 seconds over the course of the last few years. So how do we engage, interact, and provoke conversation? And so I think, everything being all digital, it's been this terrific way because we've actually collected even more data about what customers are doing in these live events. And at the same time, just trying to keep and maintain interaction, interest. So we've been super creative. I'm sure you all have been too, and we can talk about that later if we have time.
Great. Chandar?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Carol said. I'll talk about challenge and opportunity in two different ways. I think the challenge, to Carol's point, is how do we keep our community engaged in these virtual events, right? And digital fatigue is there, and we all are having digital fatigue in different forums. So one interesting pivot point is that we actually went away from doing a large conference like, VMworld is amazing, and we have a conference called Inspire on our end. But rather than doing this whole one-to-many conference, we said, let's do one-to-few micro community engagement so that it's 8 to 12 to 15 people engaging in authentic conversations that helps deal acceleration and community activation at the same time. So that is kind of how do you keep these people engaged in a way that's meaningful, authentic, and to your point, 8 seconds is probably a lot today in terms of attention spans, right? So Carol, so I think that's the challenge, to continue to do that. The opportunity, I would say, is, what COVID has taught us is that our customers are more important than ever before. So what does that mean? It means that it gives us the ability as marketers to balance the boat better in terms of our spend. So a lot of the spend is now on acquisition marketing in a number of companies, especially smaller companies. How can we balance the boat better, more into lifecycle marketing, more on expansion, and be thoughtful about that into our install base, as well as be programmatic about advocacy to create that flywheel? It's a great forcing function for us to go think about it more and do more about it.
Thank you. And Stacy, how do you, large conferences, virtually everyone's over Zoom, how do you keep engagement? What are your thoughts here on the biggest opportunities?
Well, I think it's so interesting, right? Because we all are talking about these exact same challenges. And I was talking to my team recently, and we've kind of created them into the 3 Ps of the challenges that marketers are facing because of the digital noise that you both talked about, right? We all rushed to digital, so we shifted all of our investment to digital channels and just created this mass amount of digital noise that now has created a backlash of, I want more privacy. So that's the first P. But at the same time, I also want my buying journey to be more personalized. So we're trying to, as marketers, right, deliver more privacy compliant, but yet personalized outreach to the prospects that we're trying to reach. And then if you kind of dig into what our teams are facing on a daily basis, is just this proliferation of tools, right? All of us have dozens of MarTech, sales tech tools that our teams are using, and it's causing all of the siloed data and siloed teams and processes. And so when you think about how do I deliver now, Chandar, to your point, I really want to have super engaging experiences that are personalized, privacy compliant, and make it feel like a special buying journey just for you. It just becomes really, really hard to do. And so that's kind of how we're thinking about, how do we solve it internally at Dun & Bradstreet, but then also, how do we help solve that for our customers as well?
Yeah, I like the 3 Ps for sure, as a take on what we've traditionally talked about. I'll tell you that, what I saw in 2020 last year was a need to be hyper relevant. And so how do you create relevancy in a time where there's a tremendous amount of noise? And that noise is not only from like a business aspect, but everything that was happening in the societal, what was happening in personal. And one of the things that we did is, we were already digital. I hear, is marketing digital? It's like, of course we're digital. We're doing so much that's digital, but it was the shift of everything to digital and doing it really fast. We shifted everything in 2 weeks, every single event, every single customer briefing, every single, small gathering. It was like, it's all digital, training, learning, labs, all digital. And the need really was then, okay, so if it's about like, what's happening with remote work, for us, it was, how do you think about, secure remote workforces? We had customers, that were, in school districts that had everything, that was in-person learning, and they needed to shift 40,000 teachers and students to learn remotely. And they had to do it really in decisions in minutes versus months. It wasn't something that they could, if they weren't already on some kind of journey in digital, then it was even more difficult, but they had to shift fast. And so being able to be relevant in that time, being able to get the message out in a broad way so people could understand like what was the value. And then how do you have those stories? How does that storytelling resonate? And what does it mean for people to be able to relate to other companies that were going through it? And how did they do it? Because everyone was learning at the same time. So I think this key of like relevancy, engagement has been critical over the past year. And I do think it's the biggest opportunity for us to look at how we move forward and what is the key for relevancy in terms of customer needs. Okay.
I just want to echo what you just said, Jean. I just want to echo because what you just said, and Stacy and Chandar, around personalization at scale, like that ability to, we talk a lot, we do a lot of ABM at scale, is to drive the really good segmentation, really strong understanding, and then micro-targeting your messages either through smaller events or through other digital mechanisms. Just, I think we all have gotten a lot better this past year. Hopefully we can retain that and keep getting better.
Yeah, well, I mean, the next question is really around how do you think the role has evolved? And this notion of like personalized engagement at scale. Carol, what are your thoughts on how the roles evolved for you as a CMO? And is that part of
we just had, for those of you who don't know, we just had several startups pitch to us. And it was interesting because they all were taking a different approach to helping marketers do better personalization at scale. I mean, I'm generalizing, but this idea of being able to collect the right data, analyze it. So we've spent a lot of time this past year on our data cleansing, our data warehouse, and our segmentation. You cannot do ABM at scale, personalization at scale, without really good data. And so that's where we've spent our time. And I'm really pleased. I mean, we're getting better and better. We still have a long way to go. And the other part we've been working on is, it's this data cleansing about like who it is. So the segmentation, it's what they're interested in. But just one of the points earlier is, I think it was yours, Chandar, about the life cycle marketing, doing a better job talking to our existing customers, especially here at VMware. We're in a transition from on-prem licensed software to SaaS and subscription. And it's a pretty, big change. So how do we create those conversations to expand? So we've spent a lot more time looking through the product data, the behavioral data, to ensure we're helping customers get educated and learn, use, and consume more at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I mean, what I see is that the role of a CMO is now becoming so entrenched, not just with thinking about the external facing activity that we do, but it's also working back and thinking about like, how clean is your data? How is your data managed? What kind of sources are you getting of data? Are those internal? Are those product? Are those transactional? Are those behavioral? And then how do we actually, manage that data? How do we ensure we've got a single source of truth of that data so that we can all work off of common dashboards? I spent a lot of time this year thinking about, when you go from like a one product company to now a whole portfolio of products that serve a lot of different customers, we went from basically 2 or 3 buyers to over 12. And it was like, Who are those personas? What are their needs? Do we understand those customers? Do we understand even how they buy, how they learn, how they want to interact? Developers were like, I don't want to talk to someone in sales. Like, just give me all the information, allow for me to do a quick trial, and let me get up and running quickly in the service. More customers said, I want to really have, that face-to-face time, but by the way, not face-to-face. So we have to figure out, how do we do engagement, over Zoom? How do we still have a white glove treatment? But it's collecting all that data that comes from those conversations and ensuring that you can better understand who that customer is, because that personalization at scale, as you mentioned, Carol, is so super important right now, especially in digital. Now, if you think about the tools and techniques that might take, Chandar, what tools or techniques did you do to help you, surface in on like, what was that customer problem, making sure you had the data, and then what did you do to do better engagement or experiences?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's raining tools in MarTech, as you know, there's a lot of tools out there. But I'm going to take from what Carol said, which is a very good point, which is, how do you create personalization at scale in a meaningful, authentic way? So starting with that, we use Demandbase, for example, as a tool. We are trying to bring the entire experience to personalization, which now with Engagio, where we are trying to get that hyper personalization right from the start of the journey. All the way up in, when I say start of the journey, anonymous buyer to known buyer on the top of the funnel, and then bring it in, integrated into account-based marketing, which Carol talked about, in specific target accounts, and how does sales have visibility and drive that personalization engagement of the different personas, the economic buyer, the champion, as well as the influencers, and getting the visibility. So that's one tool that was effective for us. The other tool, and there's a lot of startups and entrepreneurs on the line, one of the challenges that we have is many of us are not VMware or Dun & Bradstreet on the line. And those companies are great brands that have earned the right to engage with our prospects, right? They've earned the right to engage. So people will give their name and because they know the brand. But a lot of startups on the line is like, why should I give you my name and my information without, in the give to get equation, I need to get something of value. So in that thing for us is there is a short tool called Hushly. And in this idea that if you're giving content, nobody wants to fill out an e-matrimony form and give you all the different, 33 dimensions if you to go take that content, right? So you want to be as short as possible. So in that, Hushly is a great tool for us to do progressive profiling. Simple way for us to think about it is that what's the least amount of information that somebody can give you for you to start downloading content from you, and use that as a progressive profiling need. That's been a very effective tool for us in terms of how to engage buyers in the least intrusive way possible. And as a small brand, I would recommend some of those tools.
Yeah, and Chandar, you talked about the tools. One of the questions that has come through on the chat has been around, like, how do you then leverage and harness all the data, and then how do you actually get the right insights? So you've got the tools, you can drive the engagement, but are there people that need to be hired? There's specific roles or skills. I know for me, like, I had almost 15 data scientists on my team. I mean, it was like the heart of the organization to think about, how do you have all that data come in? How do you start to leverage intent data? How do you build the right predictability in models? And then how do you scale that across your segmentation strategy? Do you see that as something that you would do as well, or something you would recommend for startups, even if they just had 1 or 2 people on staff, to be able to think about that engagement internally and how they reach customers?
I am passionate about that. I was at Marketo as a CMO, so I know that marketing is the science of storytelling. That's a simple way to look at it. So we have to be full brain marketers as a team, and having data scientists who can really do all the stuff around the data part of marketing is critical for success as the company scales. So, you had me at hello when you said that. So I'm very passionate about that from that perspective for sure.
Hey, Stacy, what about you?
I agree with that. I think, and partnering data scientists with the business owner side of marketing, right? So as you think about really getting the right, trying to uncover those nuggets of insights that we're all looking for in our data, is first, the struggle is getting all the data corralled into one place so you can actually start to uncover that. But then it really is a partnership between the marketing business owners of what outcomes am I trying to drive? And so therefore, what questions do I have to ask of the data, and partnership with really great data scientists who then can help answer those questions. And so it really is, so much of a question and answer kind of partnership that you see between the data scientists that are part of the marketing team, and then the marketing business owners who own that revenue number at the end of the day.
Absolutely. One of the questions that's also come through on the chat is around, as you look at, more digital engagement, as you look at, marketing becoming more of a center of how they think about that customer and pulling all that data together, is there a role that now has grown for marketing to be more accountable for revenue? Is that something that you're seeing at Dun & Bradstreet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of, as we think about the tools or techniques, right, to drive growth, it really does start with defining, what are those revenue objectives that marketing is responsible for, and then getting the team aligned kind of end to end against those objectives. And so absolutely, I think that is really the starting point, is defining, what is the team focused on together? What is that revenue outcome? And then that really dictates the kinds of tools that you need, the kind of data that you need, the kinds of insights that you need back from the data, so that you can make the right decisions from first touch of a prospect, and even identifying who are the right prospects you should be going after, all the way through to how do I provide the most efficient and personalized journey through that buying journey.
I would just piggyback on one thing Stacy said, if you don't, on that, Jane, just one thing I would say to the point on revenue, I would just take the liberty of saying, we call our entire team revenue marketing. And that was a mindset thing. Why do marketing anyway? Why do brand marketing? Why do advocacy marketing? At the end of the day, it's for one reason. We are driving revenue. So that's a mindset thing. So I thought Stacy, I completely agree with the point you said.
That's great. That's great. And part of it, I think, is, is the combination of the data that you collect with the partnerships and you have to, form and have across the business, to how you actually pull that, those tools and stack together so that you can be able to see that customer through the journey. And, as revenue grows and as, engagement becomes more digital, what I saw is that, marketing before had more influence over the top of the funnel, bringing awareness and customers in. But now you have to be able to have a whole connection, that whole visibility to see full attribution all the way through to know what's working and what's going to win in the market. And as you think about teams and how you have your teams, come together, and in what ways, how do you get the most out of your teams in that environment? Carol, I don't know, how have you done that at VMware? You joined in the middle of the pandemic and and joining a brand new company and a brand new team. How did you start to get to know your team, and how did you really move your team forward to get the most potential out of driving the revenue for the business?
Yeah, and yes, and all of the above. Virtually or in person, so much of building a relationship are the same basic things, right? It's establishing trust, clarifying the mission, explaining the why a few times over and over again. So I've found that I've had to do that and keep doing that. Everyone is a little bit burnt out. Everyone's a little zoomed out. Everyone's digitally exhausted. So re-inspiring, reigniting a team is what I came in to do, and I've been doing that. A few tactical things that we've done, it's the obvious, like start your meetings not by just jumping into the transactional pieces, but by checking in. I've started a series of coffee talks, and I do them at different time zones, and they're small groups, and people can sign up. It's all opt-in, and there is no agenda. We come and we just talk to each other. I've actually found that to be super useful for getting to know all the levels of the team. And then we decided to hold an annual marketing summit kickoff right after sales kickoff that, normally would have been done in person. And we decided, do we need to do it? And we did it. It was a very bottoms up, organic sharing, and it was really, really helpful for just bringing everyone together, because everyone wants to feel and be a valued member of a winning team with an inspired mission. And so, creating those moments, and I'm sure you all have some other great tactical ways to do that. I just am looking every opportunity to do that, to reinvigorate and just help everyone, effectively recommit and re-engage every day.
Yeah, I love your coffee talk examples, because we did very much the same. And like Carol, I joined the week after the offices shut down. So still looking forward to meeting people in 3 dimensions at some point. But Carol, we do the same. So I've got coffee chats. We branded them espresso yourself. You get a gift card, Starbucks gift card the day before, so you can go grab your coffee. We can share it virtually. But I think, you're so right about really communicating the shared mission, the shared objectives. And we also set up an award program that we have as part of our new monthly marketing meetup that we also started as part of everybody working remotely, but really just elevating the incredible work that the teams are doing to exemplify progress and results against the objectives that we all, came together to deliver. So I agree. People are still, we all are still craving, right, that interaction, regardless whether it's virtual or in person.
I almost branded the nighttime ones cocktails with Carol, but then
I love that.
quite, wasn't quite as inclusive as
Carol, I would join that.
Sorry, go ahead.
So what about you?
I think these are all great points. I think the one tactic that's worked, I think two tactics I would say very quickly. One is, they're zoomed out on one hand. The other hand, when I have to have a conversation or make a point to the larger team, rather than sending a long email, I do a 2-minute video call, video recording. In other words, I record myself in video and send that video, whether it's to anybody on the organization or a weekly recap of 3 minutes on what happened this week. I'll tell you, I've gotten feedback that's so much effective because you're all in all these remote locations, but having that visual interaction, although asynchronous in this way, has been really effective on one sense. So get that Zoom, record 2 minutes, send it. I think that's more effective than a long email, right? That's one. The second thing I would say is mandatory days off. So today, I hope nobody on my team is listening today because today is our mandatory day off. Get offline, don't be online, and get recharged. So that's another tactic that's starting to deploy.
That's great. That frequency of communication. I know I started holding what's called What's Up Marketing, and I did it every other week. And so it was like you used to have like these, of course, everyone was meeting each other in the hallway, but we would have our quarterly all hands, we would have our quarterly, planning, but it was like, why not just start to engage and communicate much more transparently and much more frequently? We also found that, we were in the middle of implementing a lot of process, and process, not together is not that exciting. And so it was like, how do you actually elevate, working together in new and different ways? And it not just being about process. So we called it Marketing Plus. And Marketing Plus was all about like, how do we accelerate the growth of the business? But it really was an intentional journey into the next stages of how we drove into the next era of greatness. And that was from how do we look at guiding principles such as focus, or how do we gain more intelligence? How do we ensure that we have more transparency, more empathy towards each other, have more creativity, more empowerment, and then at the same time, process, roles, responsibilities, learning, so that people could share their own skills. But it was a time to say, how do we then take this opportunity to come together, and how do we take the time, more transparency, and then really think about the culture that we were creating as we worked and looked at new skills and new development as well. Now, as you think about, we have startups on the live stream, and a lot of us have launched new products in the market at various different stages, whether they were new products or they were refresh, or they were the next stage of greatness of the product portfolio. What are some of the pitfalls that you are seeing that you would say to avoid, and how would you start to relook at what would it be a way to approach a customer in a different way? And Carol, I know you've been a CEO at a company. You actually have been launching many new products along your career. What advice would you have to give to the audience here?
Oh gosh, I could tell you about all the failures. And when I look back at what's worked well and what hasn't, I mean, it sounds so obvious, but starting with the outside in, what does the customer really need? I think we all work at technology companies. We all think our babies are beautiful, and it's so natural, like the inertia to start with the product when we're launching versus the customer pain. Again, it sounds so obvious. I have to push the team, and I do this all the time around at every place I've been, which is, what is the use case? Like, think about it. Like, we all love to talk about cloud. Well, what is the actual pain point and use case? Is it for streaming data analytics? Is it for what problem are we trying to solve? And I have found that is the number one big difference. And then there's lots of, oh my goodness, so many executional things. The second little tactical thing that I've just insisted upon is we have to have a customer example, a beta customer story to point to, because they're just tech launches, as you pointed out, every day, every single day. So we've made that a requirement, that there has to be a customer there has to be customer evidence.
Great point.
Stacy, what about you?
I absolutely echo the early customer involvement. And so, once you identify that use case, Carol, then it's, the obvious of just test early and test often and get feedback and listen. Because I agree, it's so easy to, bake up something in the kitchen and think, okay, now I've got the next best thing or the next adjacent play. But really just getting that early feedback and that early customer involvement that then leads to having those alpha and beta customers is so critical.
Yeah. So beta customers, Chandar, is that a technique that you've used as well to avoid pitfalls of?
Well,
launch?
absolutely. Evidence is very important. The one additional stance I would say, to piggybacking on both what Carol and Stacy said, is for any small company today listening, if you're pitching, launching new products today, Carol's point is very valid on one hand. Like, people buy candles not because they like candles, because they want light. Start outside, and great point, Carol, on that piece. The second point I would say is essentialism, because a CFO today is a CFO. He's saying, well, he or she is saying, why do I need this technology in this stack to begin with? And what real impact does it have to top or bottom lines? So if you're a startup pitching today, be very clear on how you're directly driving any outcome that's meaningful. Otherwise, you'll just be on the sideline. You're not going to get the essential budget that's required today.
Yeah, and I would just add, because I was CEO of a small company. It was a 50-person company, and we were trying to establish a new category in the DevOps space. And this was when AWS was really just taking off. And I think what you're saying about essentialism is explaining how you fit in their existing ecosystem. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, Gene and Stacy and Chandar, which is everyone has too many tools, everyone has too many other solutions already. And so it's like, how is this going to make the customer's life easier within what they're already juggling? And everyone's like, oh, well, if you have APIs, that means you integrate. It's more than that. As we know, it's not just the tech, it's the workflow. It's how is it going to simplify your buyer's life? And there is no such thing as a buyer. There are people in buying groups, but how are you going to make your customers' lives better and simpler?
We talk about category creation, but that notion of category expansion, like solving a customer's need that may not be solved the best way today, and is there an easier or simpler way to do it? I find too that if it's a beta customer that's involved in the beginning, so that like coming out, like how do they actually have advocacy and credibility? It's also right after the product launches. Like, I don't think there's anything that's just a launch. It's like you have to launch is like the moment that those born, but then you have to nurture, and you've got to make sure you're getting that continuous customer feedback really, really early on, and then creating the right content and moments and engagement to keep that momentum going. A lot of times when you talk about a product launch, you can have a launch and then it's like you see the fall off. It's like you get the initial sizzle, but then what happens? And I think without getting that immediate customer feedback and understanding like what's working, what's not working, what do they like, what's resonating, what messages are actually resonating, what use cases are the top use cases, we think we know in the beginning, but we don't always know until we actually get it out into market and we learn more and more. So that continuous learning is a key point.
Yeah, it's such a good point to think about the life cycle beyond launch and just the criticality of customer success teams that are enabled and trained and on the ground with customers that are moving into your newly launched products, because it's that piece that's going to both inform the customer, the customer feedback and how they're experiencing the product, but then also really making sure that they are truly getting the outcomes from that product that you had promised as part of the sales cycle. So you're really thinking about, how do you not just get new customers, but then continue to retain them once they're on your products.
There was a question on how we look at, you think about launching a product, you think about the customer engagement, the data that we use to actually be able to create all that, personalized experience, not just looking at, initial leads or awareness in the market, but all the way down to revenue. There's a question that is like, how are CMOs judged on that? How are each of you looking at revenue, and what's the conversation you're having internally during your business operations meetings? And as you look at the bottom line, what's the conversation regarding revenue responsibility?
Do you have anybody to go first, Jane? Or you want to...
Go for Chandar.
Well, how much time do you have? So, just kidding. I think, as we all know, all our thing, it's the bane of marketing, right? I think the simplest way we look at measuring ourselves, and that's why I said revenue marketing, is see more, win more, and win bigger. The simple way to look at it is see more is all the pipeline, sales accepted pipeline. Nobody cares about leads. It's all an engine room of marketing, but sales accepted pipeline, see more, and that's one thing. Win more is how are you effective in your product marketing positioning, how you extend sales to win more. And then win bigger is how you're increasing our ASPs in terms of all the effectiveness of product marketing, because no sales guy is going to come and say that I won because your messaging was great. So you have to be able to measure yourself in such a way. And that's really where we measure ourselves in terms of responsibility and accountability.
I agree. For us, we have shared revenue responsibility, especially in the new business. So from a new business perspective, we have direct line, as I'm sure all of you do, accountability for new revenue generated. And then obviously there's shared responsibility for the rest of the pipe and renewals. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, of making sure that you've got those aligned goals and metrics for the team, so that then you can exactly put the right tools and data and dashboards in place, Chandar, to have that view from sales accepted pipe to opportunity creation to the progression of that pipe and through to closure, and really identify the things that are working and do more of those, and the areas that you need to address.
Yeah, I think our business is, VMware has been around 20 plus years. So we segment our business around, customer type, enterprise versus commercial mid-market. And we also look at it by kind of the solution maturity. So across those, so for example, very mature solutions that are large enterprise focused and optimized for large enterprises, we look at more of the influence, like how do we win bigger? How do we accelerate velocity, influence metrics. For that commercial mid-market, which, let's face it, a lot more of that can be influenced more easily. It's more marketing led than sales led.
Yep.
That's where we look at things like, net new logos sourced, some of the things Stacy was talking about, where we can drive a lot more and have stronger impact across the full sales journey, customer journey, not sales journey. And so we look at different, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but we actually do look at different metrics based upon the segment and the maturity of the solutions. We have some solutions that are very nascent and young because, things are coming out of labs, and we are looking at just, how do we land? How do we just get that first project? We're not looking per se at like a bigger deal. We're trying to, again, what we were talking about, how do we land those launches and make sure that we have right product market fit, that we're getting evidence. And then you have your mature products where you are, squeezing everything you can out of the orange. How do we expand faster? How do we ensure that those customers are using and getting the value? So our model is a little more complicated than I would like right now, but it has to be just our business. The portfolio is much broader and diverse. So it requires that. I think the other point that Stacy was making is the alignment with sales and sales operations. Like that's where we have aligned and spent a lot of our energy, is making sure the pipeline reports we're looking at in the forecasting meetings are the exact same data source, exact same definitions. Again, it sounds really basic, but it can be a process to get there.
Yeah, that single source of truth for sure. I know in some roles, I've gone all the way to looking at revenue, and even in, our operation meetings had to show what is the full pipe. Now it was more digital commerce. It was more, the route to market was more self-service. It was definitely SaaS based. And so being able to influence all the way through was something that, lean more into marketing, being accountable for revenue. I think, whether it's product maturity, consumption of technology, how you go to market, it then definitely leans more into influence. And so how do you be able to go all the way to pipe, and then how do you look at the influence as you get into sales opportunities, where either a partner or a salesperson has to close that deal? what I saw during COVID is that, the influence that marketing had pre-COVID, it was like 60% influence. During COVID, it got up to 85+% of influence because everyone's digitally learning. And so the way in which people were learning was online, and the way in which marketing was now getting more and more integrated into all of the engagement with our deals was increasing, over the last 12 months. I think that's not a trend that's going to reverse itself, that now that we come out. I actually feel like, we've all been through this digitalization. We've all been through this time where people are used to now engaging more. They actually expect more online. They expect to have, things more personalized. And that's what I see, is looking at, going out of, into 2021, is that, marketing is definitely a center. It is a cross connection across the whole business. And it's everyone working together as we look at how to drive growth and accelerate that for the company that we work for. So I know that we're almost at time. I was going to do a quick lightning round and just say, if you have one word that, and how you're feeling about, 2021 and moving forward, what would that be? So lightning round, Carol, what's your word?
Bubblicious.
I'm going to stick in the B's and go with bullish.
Optimistically agile, hyphenated.
And my word is bold. Let's be bold.
Great.
Let's go boldly.
You got all the B's. Great.
I love it. So think back to you. Exciting time with the CMOs here. All of us, connecting, collaborating on, how we're looking at, what's the role marketing is playing, opportunities, challenges, and how we see, us, and engaging going forward and driving the business. So back over to you.
So thanks a lot, guys. I think it's very rare for entrepreneurs and investors to see, people of such caliber is in one platform and learn from their insight and wisdom. So really, really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.